Okay, so on notes 1-4, we're going to be looking at linear application problems. So we're going to be writing an equation for each of the following and solving it. We're going to round answers appropriately. Okay, so on this first one, it says at the end of the day, Jeff found that the total cash register receipts at the motel where he works were $286.20. This included sales tax of 8%. You're wanting to find the amount of tax. Okay, so let's talk about tax. So tax is something that you're charged whenever you're purchasing something. So if you were to go into a store and purchase something, you would need to figure out how much tax you're going to pay in order to know your total amount at the end. So in order to find sales tax of how much you're going to pay, you have to multiply the original cost by your sales tax rate. That gives you how much tax you're going to have to pay, okay? So we're going to need to come up with a variable, so I'm just going to use x, and that's going to represent the cost before tax. Okay, because that's something that you have to know in order to figure out how much tax you're going to pay. Okay, so we're going to have the cost before tax. We're going to have to add your tax amount, which is 8% times your cost before tax. So that's going to be 0.08x, because anytime you're dealing with a percent, you're going to need to change that to a decimal. Okay, that should give you the total amount. So 286.20. Okay, so to figure out your total, you take your original cost before tax plus the tax amount. That should give you your total. Okay, so then we're going to solve the equation. So we're having to add these. This is a 1 in front of that x. So if we add those x's, that's 1.08x equals 286.20. Okay, so in order to solve for x here, we're going to have to divide by 1.08. So our x is going to equal, when you divide that, 265. Okay, so look back at your x. That was the cost before tax, but we circled find the amount of tax. Okay, so two different ways of doing it. You can subtract that total, or the 265, from the total amount. So 286.20 minus 265, or you could do 0.08 times 265. So either way, you should be getting the same answer. So I'm just going to do 286.20 minus 265. So that should equal $21.20. So there's your tax amount. Okay, so let's look at 2. Louise got scores of 88 and 78 on her first 2 tests. What score must she make on her 3rd test to keep an average of 80 or greater? Okay, so you're talking about averaging. So we're looking for the score on her 3rd test. So I'm just going to label that as just x. It doesn't matter what variable you use. So that's going to be the score on the 3rd test. Okay, so to average something, you add everything up, divide it by the number that you're adding up. So there's 3 tests. First one's 88, plus the second one, 78, plus the third one, which we don't know. So we would need to add all of those test grades up, divide it by the number that there are. So there's 3. Make sure not to divide it by 2. There's 3 tests. And then we want that to be 80 or greater. So we want that to be greater than or equal to 80. So this one we're going to set up an inequality. Okay, so first step would be to get rid of that 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So that would be 240 on that right side. I'm going to go ahead and add those two tests together. So that's going to be 166 plus x. So then really all I need to do is subtract 166. And we have x is greater than or equal, that would be 74. Okay, so we were looking for the score on the third test in order to have an average of 80 or greater. So she must make a 74 or better. Okay, so make sure that you understand what your answer means. I don't want you just to put x is greater than or equal to 74. I want you to explain it. Okay, so she has to make at least a 74. So you could have also written that for your answer. Okay, so on these problems, having to define your variable, so come up with what it represents, and then you're having to set up your equation or inequality in order to solve for your variable. Okay, so let's take a look at number 3. A couple wishes to rent a car for 1 day while on vacation. Ford car rental wants $15 per day and 14 cents per mile. Chevrolet for a day wants $14 per day and 16 cents per mile. After how many miles would the price to rent Chevrolet exceed the price to rent Ford? So we're trying to figure out the number of miles. So I'm going to say x is going to represent the number of miles. We want the Chevrolet price to exceed, which means go over. So we want Chevrolet to be greater than the price for the Ford. Okay, so now we can set it up. So Chevrolet on the left side, they charge 14 per day, and we know that we're only using it, or the couple's only using it for 1 day, so that would be $14 plus 16 cents for every mile. We don't know how many miles, so we're going to have to multiply 0.16 times x. That's going to be greater than. Ford charges 15 for 1 day and 14 cents per mile, so 0.14 times x. Okay, so now we're going to need to solve this inequality. So I will subtract 0.14x. So that's 14 plus 0.02x is greater than 15. So I'll subtract 14 over, so I should end up with 0.02x is greater than 1, because I'm subtracting 14 over. Once I divide that, you should get x is greater than 50. 1 divided by 0.02. So it said, after how many miles would the price to rent Chevrolet exceed the price to rent Ford? And that would be after 50 miles. Okay, so make sure you explain your answer. Okay, let's take a look at the back. Okay, so number 4, we have Steve is saving to buy a car. He has decided he will start looking as soon as he has saved $2,000. If he has $1,100 in savings now and he can save $150 a month, how many months will it be before Steve can begin looking at cars? So we're trying to find the number of months, so that's going to represent our variable. Okay, so we know that he's starting out with $1,100 and he's gonna save $150 every month. We don't know the number of months, so we would need to do 150 times X, and we want that to equal $2,000 because he's not gonna start looking until it's at 2,000. So I'm solving the equation, so subtracting 1,100. So that's 150x equals 900. And then divide by 150, you should get x equals 6. So it says, how many months will it be before Steve can begin looking at cars? Exactly 6 months. Okay, so let's take a look at 5. Alg Corporation produces a CD-RW drive at a cost of $120 each with fixed cost of $36,000. The CD-RW drive sells for $180. How many drives must Alg Corporation sell to break even? Okay, so we need to know what break even means. Okay, so anytime you own a company, to break even, that means the cost of producing the product needs to equal the total amount of sales that you have. Okay, so I'm just gonna write that down. So break even, that means the cost of production needs to equal the total sales. Okay, so we're looking for how many drives. So I'm going to just say X is going to be number of drives. So the cost of producing these drives is 120 each. So 120X plus fixed costs. Fixed cost are costs that never change. So no matter how many you produce, you're always going to be charged whatever that fixed cost would be. So in this case, always be charged $36,000. Now a fixed cost can be for supplies needed to produce it, or having to pay your employees to make them, so things like that. And that will need to equal your sales. So they are selling the drives for $180 each. So 180 times the number of drives. So we will solve this equation. So we'll subtract 120x. So you get 36,000 equals 60x. And then when you divide, you should get x equals 600. So we circled how many drives must Alg Corporation sell to break even. So exactly 600 drives. So on these word problems, you need to understand your solution. So explain that. Okay, let's look at this last one. A publishing company finds that the cost of publishing a certain book is $12.50 per copy. The fixed cost for publishing the book or books are $35,000. How many books must the company publish and sell in order to have a profit of at least $15,000 if each book sells for $25? So let's talk about profit. So we were talking about a company on number 5. So same thing here. Profit is how much you're actually making. Okay, so at a company. So after you take away everything that it cost you to produce whatever it is or publish whatever it is that you're publishing, after you take that away, that's how much profit you're going to make. So in order to figure out profit, there's a formula for it. You're going to take the total sales and you're going to take away your cost, in this example, of publishing. That should give you your profit. Okay, so in this example, we're looking for the number of books. So I'm just going to use X for the number of books. So total sales, they are selling the books for $25 each. So that would be 25 times the number of books sold. So that would be 25X. We are subtracting the cost of publishing the books. So most of the time on cost of publishing or producing, there's going to be more than one. So I'm going to put in parentheses here. So we know that it costs them $12.50 for every book published, plus fixed costs. Remember we talked about that. That's a cost that never changes. So they're charged $35,000. I'm going to erase that. So that should give us our total cost of publishing these books. Now, we want that to have a profit of at least $15,000. So that number should be greater than or equal to $15,000. So on these types of problems, you're going to need to distribute that subtraction sign through. So you should have 25x minus 12.5x minus the 35,000. Okay, so now I'm going to combine like terms. So I'm going to combine the x's. So that would be 12.5x. because you're subtracting 1250 from 25. And then I'm going to go ahead and add that 35,000 over to the 15,000. So when I add that 35,000 over, that's going to give me a total of 50,000 on that right side. Okay, so when I give me some more room, when I divide here, $50,000 divided by 12.5, you should get 4,000. Okay, so we circle how many books must the company publish and sell in order to have a profit of at least 15,000. So at least 4,000 books. Okay, so anytime you have a problem that's talking about profit, to get profit, you always take your total sales minus however much it's going to cost you to make the product that you're selling. That should give you your profit there. Okay, so first step, you're always wanting to identify or define your variable. Once you know that, then you can start setting up your equation or inequality, and then you're just solving that equation inequality like we did last week.